World Rugby's technical committee recommended South Africa. Their own independent report said South Africa scored highest. Then within 24 hours, France launched a behind-the-scenes campaign. Rugby Africa, whose offices are literally inside SA Rugby headquarters, switched their vote, and Bernard Laporte, the man who led France's bid, was later convicted of corruption. They didn't just beat South Africa for the 2023 World Cup, they stole it. I'm back with another one, and today we're exposing the biggest robbery in rugby history. How the most successful World Cup nation got blocked from hosting. How a secret ballot overturned an independent technical review, and how the man behind it all ended up convicted of corruption. Let's start with what actually happened in 2017. Three nations bid to host the 2023 Rugby World Cup: Ireland, France, and South Africa. World Rugby created a comprehensive weighted criteria scorecard with independent experts. They established a technical review committee to evaluate every aspect of each bid: infrastructure, venues, security, finance, commercial potential. This wasn't subjective opinion. This was objective analysis, with points awarded based on measurable criteria. The committee spent 10 months examining everything: site visits to all three countries, stadium inspections, financial projections, security assessments. Then in late October 2017, they released their report. The recommendation was unanimous. South Africa should host the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Not close, unanimous. South Africa finished first in 3 of the 5 main categories. They scored first or tied first in 22 of the 27 subcategories. France scored first or tied first in 14. The numbers weren't close. South Africa dominated the technical evaluation. Their stadiums were ready. 8 rugby-specific venues across 7 cities, 4 capable of hosting the final. No construction needed. Everything was in place. France had problems. 5 of their 9 venue guarantees were still subject to city approval. 8 stadiums would host football during the World Cup, meaning undersized pitches at every match venue. The report specifically noted these concerns. Ireland had smaller stadiums, not built for major tournaments. On infrastructure, South Africa topped the rankings. On host cities, South Africa led again. The financial projections were comparable. South Africa offered £160 million, France offered £150 million, but even accounting for France's slight financial advantage, the technical review still recommended South Africa. Several major rugby nations immediately announced they would vote according to the technical review. New Zealand went public first. Their CEO made the obvious point: why employ an independent review group to examine all bids and then ignore their findings? The vote was scheduled for November 15 in London, 2 weeks away. South Africa's delegation arrived confident they'd be hosting the 2023 World Cup. Then Bernard Laporte made his move. Bernard Laporte was president of the French Rugby Federation and World Rugby's vice president. He was leading France's bid. When the technical review came out recommending South Africa, Laporte exploded. He publicly called the report nonsense. He accused World Rugby of incompetence. He launched a massive offensive within 24 hours of the report being released. Laporte sent a 50-page counter-report to World Rugby, criticizing the technical review. He met with voting delegates behind closed doors. Long meetings, intensive lobbying, the kind of campaigning that happens away from public scrutiny. And something shifted. Countries that had indicated support for following the technical recommendation started reconsidering. The transparent process World Rugby promised suddenly became opaque. Claude Atcher, France's bid leader, promised that if France won, it would prevent the death of rugby. Strong language. The implication was clear: vote for France or rugby dies. That's not evidence-based argument. That's emotional manipulation. November 15th arrived. The World Rugby Council gathered in London. 39 votes would be cast. The board had unanimously recommended South Africa. The independent technical review supported South Africa. The process World Rugby designed pointed to one conclusion. And then they held a secret ballot, first-round voting. France received 18 votes. South Africa got 13. Ireland got 8. Ireland was eliminated. The Irish delegation was devastated. Second-round voting. Just France and South Africa remaining. France won. 24 votes to 15. Decisive. Overwhelming. Completely against the technical recommendation. When Bill Beaumont announced France as the winner, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then Bernard Laporte started fist-pumping, celebrating like he'd won a test match. The French delegation erupted. The South African delegation sat in shock. Mark Alexander, SA Rugby president, was desolated. Jury Roux, SA Rugby CEO, called the final 2 weeks an opaque period in an otherwise transparent process. He was diplomatic, but the message was clear. Something happened behind the scenes that overturned everything the technical process established. The immediate questions weren't about France's capabilities as hosts. Everyone knew France could host a World Cup. The questions were about the process. Why create an independent technical review if the council would ignore it? Why spend 10 months evaluating bids if politics would decide anyway? Bill Beaumont tried to defend the decision. He insisted the process worked, but his discomfort was visible. Brett Gosper, World Rugby's CEO, explained they used a secret ballot, so people could vote without fear. Without fear of what exactly? Without fear of being held accountable for ignoring expert recommendations. The optics were terrible. Rugby had just demonstrated that behind closed doors, politics trumps evidence.
Fast forward to December 2022, 5 years after that controversial vote, Bernard Laporte is convicted of corruption by a French court. The charges relate to showing favoritism in awarding a sponsorship contract for the French national team. The court found Laporte guilty, sentenced him to a 2-year suspended prison term, banned him from holding any rugby post for 2 years. This wasn't alleged corruption. This was a court conviction, criminal corruption, and immediately every South African started asking the same question. If Laporte was corrupt in 2022, was he corrupt in 2017? If he showed favoritism in sponsorship deals, did he use similar tactics to win the World Cup bid? Claude Atcher, who led France's bid alongside Laporte, had already been fired earlier in 2022. The two men who fronted France's successful bid were both gone before the tournament started, both under clouds of misconduct. The pattern became impossible to ignore. These weren't men committed to fair process. These were operators who worked the system, and they got results in November 2017, when every objective measure said they shouldn't have. World Rugby remained largely silent about the implications. They never addressed the obvious question: if the man who led the successful 2023 bid was corrupt, should we revisit how that bid succeeded? The answer was no, and proving corruption specifically related to the bid vote would be nearly impossible. Secret ballots by design leave no evidence trail, but the timing demands attention. Within 24 hours of the technical review recommending South Africa, Laporte launched his campaign, aggressive, public, behind closed doors, and somehow countries switched positions. Rugby Africa voted for France. How does that happen without persuasion beyond the merits of the bid? The financial gap wasn't large enough to explain a 24-15 vote. The stadiums alone should have been decisive. South Africa had everything ready. France had venue guarantees pending approval. Yet voters decided France was the better choice. Against expert recommendation, against technical analysis, against the process World Rugby designed. The only explanation is politics, relationships, lobbying, the kind of influence that happens in private meetings. The kind Bernard Laporte specialized in. The kind that 5 years later got him convicted of corruption. South African rugby has never forgotten. Players know the story. Coaches know what happened. Before the 2023 quarter-final against France, Rassie Erasmus told his team about the bid, about what really happened, about how the tournament came to France. And Damien de Allende said later that once they understood the full story, it gave them an edge. He felt zero sympathy for France when South Africa knocked them out. That's not poor sportsmanship. That's justice. The Springboks went on to win that World Cup. In France, the country that took hosting rights from them, they did it with full knowledge that they were playing in a tournament that should have been in South Africa. Every victory felt sweeter. Every win carried extra meaning. By the time they lifted the Webb Ellis Cup, they'd made their point. You can steal the hosting rights, you can work the politics, but you can't stop South Africa from winning.
4 World Cup titles now, more than any other nation, back-to-back champions, and almost certainly never hosting again. Here's what nobody wants to acknowledge. South Africa will likely never host another Rugby World Cup. Not because they can't, but because they won't. SA Rugby shelved plans to bid for 2027 and 2031. The South African government cannot provide the guarantee World Rugby requires. When you need to guarantee billions just for the privilege of hosting, only wealthy nations can compete. Australia is getting 2027. The United States is expected to get 2031. South Africa submitted bids for 2011, 2015, 2019, and 2023, failed every single time. Even when they had the best technical bid, they still lost. The message is clear. Rugby World Cups from 2015 to 2023 were all in the Northern Hemisphere. 3 consecutive tournaments. That's not coincidence. That's preference. The centers of rugby power are in Europe. The administrative headquarters are in Dublin. And decisions reflect those realities. So what does this mean for rugby's future? World Rugby's credibility is permanently damaged. They can create all the independent reviews they want. They can promise transparency. And nobody will believe it matters, because 2017 proved the real decisions happen in secret. Until World Rugby moves to open voting, every future bid will carry the stain of what happened. Nations know technical excellence isn't enough. That following rules doesn't guarantee success. That the game beneath the game matters more than official processes. World Rugby needs fundamental reform, open voting, public accountability, consequences for corrupt behavior. That won't happen. Organizations don't admit institutional failures that massive. So the problem persists. Second, South Africa's relationship with World Rugby is permanently altered. There's no trust, no belief that fair processes will be honored. When you've been cheated so blatantly, and watched the cheater get convicted without consequences, you don't forget, you operate knowing the system is rigged. That's not healthy for rugby. But World Rugby destroyed that relationship. Third, the Springboks will keep winning. That's their response. That's their revenge. Every World Cup they win is evidence. Proof that merit matters even when systems don't recognize it. They're at 4 titles now. And they're not done. The goal is obvious, win so much that the contrast becomes undeniable. Between South Africa's achievements and their treatment. Between their dominance and their exclusion. Make it impossible to ignore. Future generations will see 4 World Cup titles alongside 1 hosting opportunity in 1995. They'll see France hosting twice in 16 years. Australia hosting 3 times. And they'll ask why South Africa was excluded. When people research that question, they'll find the 2017 bid, the technical review that recommended South Africa, the secret ballot that went to France, and Bernard Laporte's corruption conviction. The story will tell itself. Meanwhile, they keep winning. Keep proving themselves. The 2023 triumph in France was perfect. Taking the trophy in the country that stole hosting rights. Making sure everyone understood the subtext. That's Springbok rugby. They don't complain. They don't make excuses. They win. They dominate. They accumulate titles until the contrast between their treatment and their achievements becomes its own argument. And they do it knowing they're right. That they were cheated. That Bernard Laporte's conviction proved what everyone suspected. That World Rugby's 2023 bid process was a farce. Truth accumulates. Evidence piles up. Historical records don't lie. Anyone who examines the 2023 bid reaches the same conclusion. South Africa was robbed. France won through politics and likely corruption. World Rugby enabled it through secret voting. And the man who led France's bid was convicted 5 years later. Those are facts, not opinions. Facts. The story is written. The evidence exists. And every year without accountability adds to World Rugby's shame. While South Africa keeps winning, keeps building a legacy that makes the injustice more obvious with each triumph. That's how you respond to institutional corruption. When you can't change the institution, you transcend it. You succeed so dramatically that the contrast speaks for itself. You win so consistently that everyone recognizes excellence despite the obstacles. And you wait for history to render its verdict. Because history will.